First, let's start with who's here. Sarah Reed is our Chief of Staff. She makes sure that everything happens when it's supposed to happen and that everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. My name is Matthew Orr. I am the owner, founder, and chief architect for VoIPTools. So I'm a very technical guy. So if you guys have technical questions, feel free to ask and I'll do my best to get you the answers that you need. All right, on this next little part of the presentation, I'm going to blow through this fairly quickly. Those of you who have come to our webinars before may have seen this bit of the slide. But I think it's useful to understand where JWT gets involved in how our applications communicate. So we're going to start with a server that's running 3CX. And on that server, which could be either Windows or Linux, you're going to obviously install the 3CX phone system. And then in addition, you're going to install, well, part of the phone system is the 3CX call control API and the call flow designer. Then you're going to install on the 3CX server our VoIPTools relay. And the VoIPTools relay comprises both our REST API and what I call our events API. And the relay, when it's installed, it communicates to 3CX through the call control API. All right, so that's the first half of the equation. The second half of the equation is the VoIPTools server. And on this server, we're going to install SQL Server, typically the free Express edition's fine, Internet Information Server, which is our web server host, all the VoIPTools applications. So this is going to be things like Recording Manager, wallboards, dialers, call center tools, data replication, and then any custom tools that we might create for you. So how do these two servers talk together with each other? Well, you can have them both on-prem. You can have one of them on-prem and one in the cloud. It doesn't really matter. The only real requirement is that your hosting company allow you to install our relay. And as far as I know, the only one that really won't is 3CX. They won't even let you install the call flow designer on a 3CX system that's hosted by 3CX. So the two machines, they talk to each other over the internet or internally in your internal network over HTTPS. And so what we're going to talk about is this last little piece here, and that's JWT. All right, so hopefully that kind of gets you a sense of who all the players are. Let's do a little deeper dive on JWT. All right, so before we go too far, let's talk about definitions. Don't panic, there's only 4, and some of them you already know. So encryption that takes place over HTTPS is done with transport layer security. So that's the latest HTTPS encryption. And then there's 2 terms, authentication and authorization, that are important to understand the distinction between the two. Authentication is the process of verifying a person's username and password. That's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about authorization, and that's the process of verifying that the person who's requesting resources, in other words, accessing one of our APIs, is permitted to do that. And then last but not least, real quickly, JWT means JSON Web Tokens. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how these tokens are used to further secure the communication between those two servers. All right.
Matthew, there's a question.
Yep.
Can the VoIPTools server be installed on a Windows SBC?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's a Windows server. It's accessible to everything, so I don't see any reason why it couldn't be, provided that that SBC has sufficient horsepower to do whatever it is that you're trying to do. Typically, an SBC is pretty minimalistic in its resources, CPU, RAM, disk, that kind of stuff. We're going to be installing databases and web servers, and depending on which tool you use, for example, our exporter tool uses almost no resources at all, where in contrast, a wallboard is going to be fairly intensive. So the only caveat is that you have enough resources to do whatever it is that whatever VoIPTools tool you're wanting to install on that machine. Hopefully that answers that question. I would say the answer is yes. As long as it's running Windows 10 or above, or Windows Server 2016 or above, should be okay. Now, if you're running something like Pi, that's probably not going to work, because this is going to be non-Atom based CPUs. All right, so
Okay, thank you.
Okay, cool. All right, so now we're kind of diving deep down into the JWT thing, and don't panic. This is going to be at the highest possible level, so we're not going to go into the encryption algorithms that are used using these keys and that kind of stuff. Just basic understanding of what the communication flow is. So remember, in the previous slide, we had the 3CX server on the right and the VoIPTools server on the left. Same thing here. On the right, we have the server running the relay, and part of that relay is our REST API. So that's the right side. On the left side is the client application. That's going to be recording manager, voicemail manager, wallboards, those kinds of things. So let's not forget that all the communication that we're about to talk about is encrypted. So people on the outside wanting to try and get in and look at this communication, not going to happen. It's already encrypted. But before anything happens with JWT, the first thing is that you've got to share some secret keys between the client and the server. And those keys will be used to build a token. So once we've configured these two applications with the shared keys, then the client is going to make a request to the API and provide necessary security information. And the relay is going to take that information, and provided that everything is correct, it's going to generate a token, and then it's going to return that token to the client application. Then the client application is going to use that token thereafter for all of its requests. So when it needs to call an API, it's going to send that token along with its request. I should point out a couple of things. One of the things you'll notice is that when that token was generated, it was generated with an expiration date and time. Typically, that's about 15 minutes, but you could set it to whatever you wanted. So if you wanted to set it to every 20 seconds, you could do that. And so when the relay receives that token with the API request, it's going to validate that token. Is this the same token that I provided previously? And has it expired? So as long as it hasn't expired and it's the same token that was provided previously, then it'll return the requested information. So that's how JWT works. But how do we configure our applications to use JWT? And that's kind of the next part of the discussion. But before we went any further, I wanted to make sure that if anybody had any questions at this level, that we answer those before we jump into a demo and show you how to configure our tools to use JWT. We've had our JWT version of the relay available now for somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 years. So it's been out there in use, in production for a long time. But this has been kind of a beta process. We've actually not had any problems with it. In fact, I don't think we've made any changes to the JWT stuff in that whole 2 years. The reason that it's taking us this long to get JWT released to the outside world is that in order for JWT to work, any application that is going to talk with the relay and implement JWT, every one of those applications has to support JWT. And we've got a lot of applications. We've got 35, 36, 37 commercial applications, and then probably another 100 or so more custom applications. And so we've been going through and adding all the plumbing that's necessary to support JWT into all of these applications. And so we're now just starting the release of a public release of our JWT relay, and then gradually releasing each of our tools with JWT. So give us another week or so. We should be releasing to the public the JWT version of the relay and our tools. So I guess my point is that this is really early release stuff, and you'll start seeing this show up on our website over the next day or two. Okay, having said that, let's jump into the install demo. So I'm going to start out with installing the relay on a Linux box. If you look at our previous webinar that was securing the VoIPTools relay, and that's in our historical list of webinars, so you can get those recorded webinars directly from our webinars page on our website. In the previous webinar, I went through how to install our relay on a Windows box. So this time I thought I would do the Linux stuff. And this is really pretty quick. This will only take a couple of minutes to go through both installing and configuring the relay. And then I just chose Voicemail Manager as an example of installing one of our tools and then getting the two applications to talk to each other. So I'm starting this video out at the point where you've logged into your 3CX Linux box with root permissions. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to want to do is change to the OPT directory, and then within that directory, create a VoIPTools folder, and then within that folder, create a relay folder. Then from within the VoIPTools folder, we're going to download the setup tool that we use. And this link that you see there on the screen is going to change as future releases go. We'll update the manual so that you can see that. Once that executable is downloaded, we need to give it execution privileges. So that's what I'm doing here. And then actually execute the setup program. So the first thing it's going to do is say, hey, if you've got the relay running, I'm going to kill it. So be aware. So I said yes to running the relay, and now it's just going through making all of the changes and setting permissions on files and creating a service, and that was pretty much it. So now we've logged into the relay, and we're going to the settings page, and you'll note that it only lists HTTPS now in this latest version. Then we want to put in a IP restriction that says the only person that can talk to the relay is the VoIPTools server. And that pretty well locks it down all by itself. But you'll see now what's new is turning on JWT, and there's a private and a public token. And we're going to use those in just a second here. So now I've gone back to the VoIPTools website, and I'm going to the download page. I'm going to scroll down to Voicemail Manager and download that application. So this is being done on a Windows server that has been set aside to run the VoIPTools. And as was requested previously, that could be the SBC, provided your SBC is sufficient. I didn't want to make you guys watch that thing download, so I did speed up that part of the presentation. But here we are. We've got the executable that's been downloaded. This is the setup program for Voicemail Manager. So we're almost done. We've got a minute or two to go, and then this guy will be all done. I'll answer your questions if there are any. So it's a little more than a click through, but it's not too complicated to install it. The first thing we need to do is tell Voicemail Manager where the 3CX server is. So you put in the 3CX FQDN or IP address. It's already selected SSL. So now what we're doing is we're going to copy those private and public keys and insert them into the Voicemail Manager installer. And the more recent version of this tool has bigger text boxes so that you can see all that data. But it's gone out there and it's verified that it can communicate with the 3CX server. Then we're going to install a connection. We're going to configure a connection to the SQL database. That could be SQL Express. You don't need to specify a database name. We'll go ahead and create that database for you. So we just did a quick test to make sure I could talk to a SQL Server, and now it's going through the process of actually installing a Voicemail Manager and making the necessary configuration changes. So it's pretty quick. We're pretty much done. You'll see that it created a couple of icons up in the top. It's got just about 30 seconds more to go, and then it'll be done. All right, so the configuration test, and by the way, all of this has been in real time. This is how long it actually takes to do. The only exception was the download time, because I'm in London right now and downloading from our USA servers. It takes a while for that installer to download. But that's basically it. Once it's done install, you click on that icon, you put in your extension and voicemail pin, and you're done. So that's basically it. That's really the presentation for today. I want to thank everybody for giving us some of your day today. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out to us. The sales team is sales@voiptools.com. We have live chat and phone. We have somebody on staff. We have a whole support team that's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So if you need help, if you have questions, you should be able to get some help. If you want a technical question and you want to go straight to the support team, you can email support@voiptools.com, and that'll create a ticket. And I review with the development team any development tickets every single day. So we go through these tickets on a regular basis every day. If you want to get our attention, that might be the best way to do it, is support@voiptools.com. In any case, I appreciate your time, and I hope I answered all your questions. I think you'll agree that we've made it pretty darn secure. The only two people that can talk to each other are the relay and the VoIPTools server. And even if you were to insert yourself in that some way, you would have to have the secret keys in order to initiate the request. And then every single time that you submit a request to our API, with each request, you have to provide that token. And if the token's expired, you got to ask for a new token before it'll let you make another request of the API. All right, with that, I thank you for your time, and we'll call it a day. Thank you.